Hi, everyone, and welcome back to another interview, part of this creative series on Reality House. We're joined again by Ant. How are you doing, Ant?
Hi guys, yeah, good, all good.
And our guest today is Mate Steinforth. How are you doing, mate?
Good. Thanks, guys. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's fantastic to have you on and really interested to learn about all about your career and some of the amazing effects and kind of 3D artwork that you've been producing. So we like to get stuck in straight away and let us know about your career to date.
Great. So, hi, I'm Marta Steinforth. That's how you say my name. But no worries. I've been doing that stuff for a long time. I mean, not specifically AR, obviously, because that hasn't been around so long. But I've been doing and making images with computers since forever, basically, like since I was a little kid. And then I studied graphic design. Still quite a classical education at that time. Like in the early 2000s. That's when I graduated. But pretty quickly pivoted towards animation and specifically 3D animation. And more specifically motion graphics, which was like the big thing that came up around that time, like late 90s, 99, 2000, something like that. And I remember like seeing like all those amazing, interesting things, and that's what I wanted to do. So that's what I did actually, and I'm German, as you hear, and but I moved to Madrid to work there as a art director, motion graphics person, and then eventually moved to New York to work with a company called PsyOp, which is very well known, or at least at that time very well known in that field, and became a creative director there. And then I moved back to Germany, to Berlin, where I started my own company. Well, actually, I became part of a company. I started a studio here in Berlin for that company. It was called Sehnsucht, which is like a weird German wordplay. Anyway, and then I did that for 10 years. And about 3 years ago, I started kind of dabbling in AR filters, which was when they just came out. Like Spark AR was released, I think, around that time. But before that, we already did a bunch of projects in augmented reality with Unreal Engine, like basically apps for, your iPhone. And then this AR thing like took off. Actually, it kind of like, I didn't think it would, to be honest, because especially in the early days, if you come from a like very high-end 3D VFX background, such as myself, doing that like for, forever, the quality of the software initially was like very poor, and the quality of the effects you could do with that software were quite low compared to what was able with a standalone app, or obviously even more so like a pre-rendered 3D animation. So yeah, it took me by surprise, but it really took off and became like this cultural phenomenon basically we're looking at today. And so I left the company beginning of that year to kind of like focus on this augmented reality thing, whatever that's going to be. But this in a nutshell is kind of like the quick playthrough, like the speed run until this point. And I realized that compared to a lot of other AR creators, I'm maybe a little bit more senior. Anyway, that's how I feel about the field. Like a lot of people are quite young. And that, I think, makes it very interesting, actually, because to me, what was really, really captivating about motion graphics, whatever 15 years ago, was that this was a complete new thing. Like people were inventing the rules of the game. And that's really exciting. But it became stale in a way because, people knew what they would expect and so on, and technically progressed, but like stylistically, it wasn't interesting anymore. And I feel that AR is at this point now, where everything is new and everything is exciting and nobody knows the rules. So we are kind of like writing the rules of the game, which you also see in the success of a lot of the filters, because it's like completely impossible to predict what works and what doesn't. Like you have like a lot of viral filters that I personally wouldn't have expected that they go viral because they're like just very, very, well, I would say poorly made, but it doesn't matter because it's the social aspect that interests people about those things. And vice versa, you have a lot of things which have a high production value but don't necessarily get traction at all because, I don't know, people don't get it or they don't like it or they don't react to it for whatever reason. So I think this is like very exciting. Well, now I already said a lot of things, so maybe I let you ask a question.
No, that's awesome. I mean, rewinding a little bit in terms of, so you kind of come from that VFX background. Was it an easy transition because you had that existing skill set to learn how to augment your creations in AR?
Yeah, that's a good question actually, because I always say it is interesting, because if you look at AR as this kind of like this new phenomenon, you have a lot of people coming from web design. A lot of people are coming from web design and getting into the AR game. Because also on the web, of course, you have more 3D content popping up, and it becomes more immersive, also websites. And on the other hand, you have like those VFX people, such as myself. And none of them really know how to do it, to be honest. Not even like what becomes viral or not, but even on a technical level, because like the web people, they know web design, but 3D is a very, very specific field. You really have to know your shit to make it look good and make it work and make it small enough so that it runs, that it downloads fast, and it make it quick enough so that it runs on all the phones and so on. And the VFX people, on the other hand, they knew how to do that for movies, but like like the scenes are way too heavy. You cannot just take a scene from there, put it on a phone, and expect it to work. And I think the folks that actually have the workflow down the most, just in terms of technical workflow, are people from the games industry, because essentially, technically speaking, an AR effect is a mobile game, right? Like it uses the same 3D engine and so on. And in my personal case, I always was interested in real-time 3D graphics. So even though I did VFX and animation, on the side, I always, dabbled in, game engines and always looking at new tools and so on. So for me personally, it was quite an easy transition, because I had a lot of knowledge already in that field. But it's not necessarily, that's what I'm saying, that someone who knows 3D animation or knows VFX, that they can just, transfer that to AR. A lot of it they can, but like there's still a lot of stuff missing. So you kind of have to know both sides of the game.
Yeah, absolutely. I love what you said in terms of it is kind of a bit of a wild west at the moment, in the sense that you could be someone that has a load of experience, in VFX or 3D kind of design, or someone that has just started and creating kind of a lo-fi concept, but that either or can go viral, and it's like you just have no idea. As you could get a big brand paying a lot of money for something that's very polished, but no one engages with it. Or I think it was Conceptual who literally just made your eyes and mouth as an orange and that went viral. So it's interesting that it is such a democratized kind of creative world, and obviously platforms like Spark and Lens have enabled that to happen. But I'm really interested actually by that, how that's for someone like yourself compared to someone that's just starting out, it's just the unknown at the moment. So
yeah, I mean, for me, it's kind of like it has two sides. It's kind of like two hearts beating in my chest, because on the one hand, I really hate that, because I'm like, well, I am the guy who has all this experience. Like all those young folks, they don't know what they're talking about, and then boom, they do some shitty bullshit effect, and it gets super viral, right? Like that's annoying to me. But at the same time, I think it's refreshing to see that happen. That, like I said, everything is new. So that is actually also, I think, like a huge upside for individual creators, because you can make interesting things that no one would have expected to see. So that's kind of like a fun part of it.
Have you had to like deconstruct your traditional practices or methods, or is it kind of the same? Or I can imagine it's just you must have to deconstruct kind of how you would normally approach a project, because it is so different.
It is. I mean, yes and no, I would say. Like if you look at a project, you will always have the same challenges, because if you work commercially, then I would say only 20% is actually making the things, and 80% is communication. So it's talking to clients. Talking about budgets also, explaining things. A huge part of the process is actually coaching the clients and hand-holding. And I'm not saying that in a bad way, but just like because they obviously don't know I don't even know, but like they know even less. So it's a lot of educating them and explaining, well, what can you do, what works, probably, hopefully, what doesn't work. There are a lot of rules that you cannot do, depending on the different platforms, and stuff like that. So a lot of communication, and that part doesn't really change at all, because in animation or VFX, it's very similar. It's a very, very technical field. And if you're not, part of it, you don't know any of the terms, you don't know any of the repercussions also of the decisions. So, right, like this is always a big one. Like if a client says, whatever, they like to change something, and then some things might sound very difficult, but are very easy to do. And on the other hand, some things might sound very easy, but they are completely redoing the whole thing. And, the client doesn't know it, and it's not their job to know it, right? Like it's our job, like my job, basically to coach them through it. So that part doesn't really change. But I think what does change is the pace, because compared to an animation project, and even if you look at like a 30-second TV spot, which was what I was working in mostly, the time frame is much longer. So usually we were working on a TV spot for like 3 months, and like a filter, I mean, you can do it in a day, but obviously communication won't be any quicker, irrelevant from what you do. So let's say I make a filter and I do it and I make it in the day, right? And then I send it to them and they take 2 days to look at it, and then they have a change request, and then I do it, and then I send it back, and then they approve it, and then and that was 2 weeks already. I didn't even do anything more than waiting for their feedback. So that part stays the same, but I would say the time frame for a filter specifically it's much shorter. So usually, I don't know, it takes a few weeks, let's say, right? Like 2, 3, 4 weeks maybe. And that is like from the first call, them saying, hey, we want a filter, this is what we need, then doing design phase and so on. But this is obviously a filter which is kind of like a more like a creative project. Others might be different, where they say, hey, we have already the assets made and we just want to be put together. But that's something I would maybe not necessarily take on as a job, because like I see my skill set or my USP I can bring to the client and the experience I have, but also in the creative vision I have. And so if it's just about building something, then I mean, I suppose I could do it, but it wouldn't be something I would necessarily think is the best fit for me.
I want to talk about your creative process and your artistic style. It's very futuristic and modern and really highly polished. I mean, could you tell us a little bit about your inspiration and your creative process?
So I mean, for me, there's a clear distinction. If I work for a client, they usually have a brief. I mean, it might be like a completely done design, or it might just be completely open. But then again, it's more about collaboration. It's about finding out what they need, like what do they want to communicate, and how do I make sure that they communicate in the way they need to. And that is not about like whether I personally like it, whether it's my taste or not, but it's about basically, again, like coaching them towards something that works. But if I do like my own stuff, obviously it's more like an artistic process, right? Where I don't care about if anyone likes it or not. I mean, I'm happy if people like it, but to be honest, if to me, it's only important if I like it. Or actually, what I've embraced recently is not even if the outcome is something I like, but if the process is something I enjoy. And this is actually something specifically with Spark AR as a tool, which is a lot of fun to just play around. So the tool is, even though it is very limited, it is very kind of like playful, the way you interact with it. And actually the limitedness, or the restrictions, kind of make it like a game in a way, because you try to make it do things that it can't do, and that's a fun part. It's really like solving puzzles in a way. That's what I like about it.
Talking about Spark AR and the actual platform a little bit, I mean, I can't remember what version it was on when I started, maybe 22 or something. And do you it is getting better and better, isn't it, over time? Like, how far do you think they're going to push it? Or do you think there'll be a point where they go, this is fine, let's move on to something else? Or do you think they'll just keep going?
Yeah, I just looked it up yesterday, actually. I downloaded the first version on October 27, 2017. So about exactly 3 years ago. I don't know which one that was, but that was still only Mac. And it didn't have any, I don't think it had any scripting. It certainly didn't have patches. And it was like super, super reduced. You could basically just put some color on your face, and that was it. Yeah, they are progressing with an incredible speed, but at the same time, Snap still has the upper hand in terms of technology, and not to even speak of ARKit. Like if you look at what those platforms can do, I mean, you can't compare ARKit with Snap Lens Studio or Spark AR because it's a framework and not a tool, but it's like, like this depth sensing stuff and so on. So Spark, even though it progresses very quickly, is not necessarily technically the best tool, but I think it has the highest adoption rate. And I think that is because of the thing I mentioned. It's very approachable. They really made sure that it's easy to understand for beginners. And while they are getting more complicated, they are implementing a lot of templates where you can just basically click and replace an image, and then you get your effect like in 3 clicks, basically. And a lot of very successful effects are done that way, right? So, but on the other hand, like with Facebook, it's impossible to know. They might just next year say, oh yeah, I mean, I don't think so, because they are investing like so heavily in AR, but they could just pivot and say, hey, we're going to do something completely different. I don't think so, but I have no idea. I think like in my mind, what would be really cool is to expand this Spark platform as, the base for all the XR products Facebook has. Like you can run it, you can run it on Portal, but it would be cool to open that up to the community, because now it's only like pre-made effects. But it would be really cool to be able to use Spark on an Oculus, so in VR. But like they have this Horizon thing, where you just basically alt space from Facebook, and that is a different thing. So I think I don't know like at what level it is compatible or whatever, but it's certainly not that you use Spark to author your things with that. And that I found a little bit, well, I mean, it might make sense, but I think it would be cool to have like one tool to be able to do VR with it and AR and everything, so that that would be really cool. That's what would hope that it becomes, but I have no idea.
How do you split kind of the different creative outputs? Obviously you're still doing a lot of animation and VFX, from your Instagram, but then also the AR effects, and then you're even kind of sharing patches and stuff that creators can buy. So how do you manage that time, and what's the split in terms of producing?
Yeah, to be honest, these days I'm pretty much 100% focused on AR Spark production. Really, I'm working at projects that are, I can't talk about them, like all NDA stuff, but it's very very enjoyable. The only downside of it is because it's NDA, I can't talk about it, and I probably won't be able to ever show it. Maybe someday if it comes out, I have no idea. But it's like all of that is kind of like Ant says, with like a February deadline. It's like most of it is like long-term things. So that's, to me, it's very enjoyable, and yeah, so that's what I'm basically doing. And then while I'm doing that, playing with Spark, obviously I am engaged with the community, because no one knows everything. So I always have a bunch of questions that I just put online, and then people answer and react to it. At the same time, I read other questions and I might react to it, and then I get an idea and be like, hey, I have an idea how you could solve that problem, and I put it together quickly, and people like it. If people like it, or if I feel that it's something usable, I put it on my Gumroad so people can buy it for a few bucks. And so this kind of like happens on the side. And the animation stuff, even though I do still, would consider myself as like a main job to be like an animation director, because that's what I've been doing like for forever. But to be honest, in the last few months at least, I haven't done any, few tests here and there, but no major animation productions. And I don't know if I miss it because like in the animation world, at least in where I was at, and in terms of professional level or whatever, you would always work with agencies, you would always work with big clients, so the projects become very heavy in terms of the process. You have a huge amount of communications, you have a lot of big budgets also, which is great obviously, but that also means that you have to do a lot of work for those projects, and you have always tight deadlines. And that is obviously all true for AR as well, minus the big budgets maybe. But the good thing is that the process is a little quicker. So I do enjoy it quite a lot to kind of like get a change from that.
There's a bit more like scope to kind of play with what we're doing with the AR stuff than if you were doing like working on, say, an animation film or where it's so like everything's got to be done perfectly on this day and stuff. Whereas I find with this stuff, there's a lot of back and forth with the client. I've even got clients where we'll put out an effect and then they'll come back a couple of days later and go, can we change this? Can we change that? It's already live, but they're not that crazy about the detail. They're kind of going, oh, we've let some of the fans use it and people have fed back to us. And I kind of like that. It's a little less stressful, isn't it, to work that way?
Yeah, I mean, it depends on the client, obviously, at the end of the day. But I think, to me, it feels like because it's so new, that's a good thing, because you as a creator are more eye to eye, I think. And like with the VFX stuff, it is so established that, clients kind of, for them, it's very easy to just go to any other place and they do it in the same way. And, you have like in the VFX sector, especially in films, you have a lot of like this, they call it the race to the bottom, basically, where you have like commoditization. So, which means that like, if you want to make a real looking CG image, it's not distinguished by your taste necessarily. I mean, obviously there's a design aspect, but it doesn't matter if like this vendor does it or this vendor or that vendor. In commercials, it's a little different because the director obviously gives his or her own, perspective to it, and that's what clients are usually interested in. So it becomes more about the creation and less about the tech. And AR, I think, is so new that no one knows what's going on. So if there's someone doing something, that's already cool. Yeah. So it's kind of like it's a difficult comparison. I wouldn't say one is good, the other is bad or whatever. It's in my personal case, obviously, I've been doing the other thing for so long that I just enjoy it. Change of pace and change of topics.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head. I think with any kind of new industry, it's kind of a positive and a negative. There's a lot of education, whether you're trying to sell the service of AR production, but also to kind of educate the clients as to what's possible. But then with that comes the freedom to kind of foster collaboration and to see, I think now with technology and, although we're living in a pandemic, a silver lining has been seeing the increase in usage of these digital platforms. More people that have more time at home are learning AR. So I think all of this is fueling kind of this, exciting new kind of democratized kind of collaboration, with all these types of creators. And so, I think we'll still have a couple of years until, these clients catch on to, what is required and things like that. Because as you said, traditional industries that have been around for so long that have standards in place like VFX, there's barriers and foundations as to pricing and all that kind of stuff. So I think it's kind of a nice place to be in at the moment. But I think we'd all like the clients to kind of know a bit more in terms of what's possible with AR. But yeah. In terms of kind of how you would approach kind of your personal effects that you spoke a bit about before, kind of what would you say to a creator that has been doing that for a while and then starting to work with brands? I mean, what would be some tips you would provide?
Well, I mean, just the basics of production, really. I don't think that's necessarily anything applies specifically to AR. I mean, don't be an asshole, right? That's important because it's a small world and it will come back to you. Yeah, I mean that's the most important tip, I guess.
Yeah, well, that's good.
And then obviously, if you're just starting out, a lot of people do need to learn a lot of basics. And then I guess like the decision for me, what is important to realize is that do you want to be an artist or do you want to be a designer? And this distinction to me, again, like what I said earlier, an artist is someone who kind of like pursues their own vision, and then they might still do commercial projects, but like people come to them because they say, hey, we want your style. And the designer is someone who kind of tries to understand the goal the client wants to, like the message the client wants to communicate or the need of the client. So it's more like a coach basically helping with this. And so a designer, I feel, should be very versatile in terms of style. Because like if you say, hey, this is my style, okay, you're not a designer in my mind. So if you want to be a good designer, I think you do also have to have a very strong technical foundation, because you cannot do any style if you don't know how it's made, right? And if you're an artist, then maybe it's more about pursuing your own brand and kind of like trying to get like establish a voice, and then hoping that people, if you want to be commercially successful, hoping that people react to it and kind of like, commission you to do their effects maybe. So this is something which I just feel that if it's totally okay to just play around and be like, okay, whatever, this is new thing, I'm just gonna dabble around a little bit. But I think it's definitely a good idea to have a clear goal in mind if you start out. And if you're at a point where you say, hey, I want to invest time in this field because, for whatever reason, and I think it's good to understand who you are and to say, this is what I'm going for. Which obviously is true for any other field as well, music or art or whatever. But yeah, those I think are the things I would encourage creators to think about. Not even saying, hey, learn Spark or learn Snapchat or Lens Studio or learn whatever, because in 5 years both of them probably not going to be around anymore, or maybe 7 years, I don't know, but they will not last your whole career, right? So it's more important to kind of like think about those foundational ideas. And I do realize that if you're young, you don't get this perspective. So it's kind of like a catch-22 a little bit, because I feel that way because I went through this, through this development, if you want to call it that way. Like I used to teach at universities, and I always try to kind of like explain this to my students, and they were looking at me like, what's this guy talking about? We just want to know how to Photoshop. But I hope something sticks, and then maybe they do think of that. But like, yeah, I would approach it like that.
Well, that's some great practical advice. Thank you for sharing that. In terms of what are you excited about for the future? What has you curious right now?
Yeah, so for me, it really is that for me, what is exciting about AI is like more like a big picture vision, really, because obviously, like what you have now, the face filters and lenses and all of that stuff, that's kind of, it's a gimmick, right? It's like it's funny. Maybe you most of them are probably useless, but it's not. I don't know. It's not changing the world. I mean, obviously, I don't know what is, but I think AI could, because if you look at media and how we as humanity, consume media, you start with mass media, right? So TV or even books in a way, but like TV and radio specifically were centralized media. So you have like one unit broadcasting the message. So if you want to be successful in that space, you just have to be annoying, right? You have to just put your message out again and again, and it doesn't really matter what you say, as long as you say it loud enough. And then we have the internet, where you have like this two-way communication. So this is where in the commercial space this term content became popular. So it's like content, because people, if they don't like it, they can just close the window. So you want to make content that is appealing to the audience, because they watch it just because they like to hear your story. So storytelling becomes a big one. And now I think it's the next paradigm shift in AR, and that's, I think that's an important point. I think a lot of people didn't understand yet, especially like clients and marketing people, or whatever, because I think it's not about content anymore, but it's more about enabling the user to tell their own story, right? Like if you want to do like a YouTube video or something, you want to do something engaging, I stick with it, it's a funny story. But if you do an AR filter, you want to do something that I can use to become whoever I want to become. And especially if you look at how social media and the internet kind of enmeshes with the real world, so it's kind of like a combination of both worlds. It's not anymore like, oh, I'm this person in the real world, and then I'm someone else on the internet, like, it's the same thing. Like it's a combined reality. So it really makes a difference how people can experiment and kind of like communicate their identity online. This is who they are. So basically, I see the AR filters as a tool for the users to take and to make whatever they want with it. And I also see that those filters are the ones that become successful if the user can make it their own. And like even more long term, I think AR is super exciting because I feel it could become the next paradigm, how we interact, the next way how we interact with data, right? Because if you look at how we interact with data now on our computers and on our smartphones, it hasn't changed in 50 years basically. Like if you look at the very, very early experiments with the graphical user interface at Xerox PARC, which but like Apple's basically stole macOS from them, like the Windows, and then Microsoft stole it from Apple. But like those foundational ideas that you have a folder, right, on your desktop, and you open it and there's a document in it. This comes from like those experiments, and this folder is literally like a US standard, folder someone had on their desktop, and they were like, oh, it's on my literal, actual, physical desktop, and I translate this paradigm into the digital space. And if you look at the very, very first mother of all demos, they called it, Doug Engelbart did in 1968 at Xerox PARC, the icon for the folder is literally the exact same icon we still use in iOS 14. That hasn't changed for 50 years. And the way we interact with data hasn't changed for 50 years, not on our computers, not on our smartphones. And now I feel, is a big opportunity to rethink all of that. Because obviously the smartphone interactions, again, it's just an intermediary step. Glasses or, some embedded type of wearable thing will come. It's not going to be Google Glass, obviously, we know that, but it might be, spectacles or the new AR thing Facebook does, but it will come. Time isn't here yet, but it will come. And once that is here, you can actually augment your reality, and I think completely rethink how you interact with data, right? So it's basically the metaverse or the holodeck or whatever. And so this, I think, can be bigger than the internet. It can be bigger than cell phones, can be bigger than all of that. And that is what excites me, because if you're part of this, well, I don't know, development, you could be the guy who invents the next, I don't know, the next slide to open maybe, right? Or the next folder icon that is there for 50 years. And this is what, to me, is really exciting about that field.
Yeah, I think, super insightful, and really interesting to hear what you described there. Well, that's unfortunately all the time that we have today. As a last question, we always like to know, where can people find you? What's the best kind of either your social handles or your
so the best is to go to my website. The new website is called betabeta.xyz.
Awesome.
There you will find like all the links and everything.
Fantastic. Brilliant. Well, thank you so much again for your time. Super interesting. Great to learn about kind of your journey and all the insight. I think, the more we speak to creators, it's just, crazy to see all the possibilities with augmented reality. But thank you so much. Thanks.
You're welcome, guys. Thanks for having me.
Bye.
Thanks.
Bye.